You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Holt.
Matt, what's up?
What's up, man?
How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm a little tired.
All right.
I'm doing fine.
I know
we're supposed to keep these things evergreen, so essentially I'm always tired. But
oh, that's interesting.
But overall I'm doing fine.
Jasmine, how are you?
Good. I'm actually happy to be back in the studio.
Wow.
Good.
Yeah.
That makes one of us.
That's all right. I'm happy to be back in studio too.
Oh,
Okay,
good.
great.
Good. I'll get there.
All right. We'll get you there.
Okay.
We'll pull you across the finish line.
Yeah.
I need it.
That's what we're here
That's
for.
what friends are for. The good times.
Dionne
and
Warwick,
tight
baby.
times. I'll be on your shot forevermore. That's what shoe-in friends are for.
That's true. All right, I'm feeling better.
Little song in your heart.
It was good.
Little
Good.
pep in your step.
Yep.
Little lace on your shoe.
Indeed. Indeed.
All right.
So, should we get to this week's
Yes.
episode? Or should
Yes.
we sing more Dionne Warwick songs?
I mean, if I need to sing more, like Dionne Warwick, yes, I will. Oh. Here we go. Here we go on Shoe-In Show. Matt needs a lift up. Matt needs some praise. Put on those Jordans and time to graze. Eat your feelings, then you walk them off.
All right. And that's the show.
I bet that'll
that made me feel better,
There
Andy.
you
I
go.
appreciate it. You made me laugh.
Little laughs.
Yep.
Little
No,
laughs.
it's always
Jasmine never
good.
laughs. It's hard to get her to laugh.
It is hard to get her to laugh.
I like
Yeah,
the challenge. I like the challenge of it, though.
Man. All right. Well, with that, so
Hopefully that lifts up all our listeners.
that did. And
now we're setting
up
the
our
level.
guests
Yep.
who we have in studio
There
as
we go.
well.
It did, yeah.
Well, that just means that whatever happens in this show,
Yep.
I mean, that just set the tone that everything else is going to be gravy from that end.
That's
right?
true.
There's
Oh,
no
yeah.
pressure now.
There's
That just
zero
took all the pressure off.
That's
The
right.
bar's low now.
There we go.
Thank you.
That's exactly what I do. Lower expectations.
Oh, man. No. So that voice you hear is Dr. Eric Gilchrest, who is my actual pastor of my church at Southern Baptist Church. We're in Springfield, Virginia.
Yep.
It all runs together. And the reason I asked Eric to come on is that last year I challenged myself to read through the entire Bible, through the Hebrew side, the Tanakh, the Old Testament, whatever you want to call it, and the New Testament, the Christian Bible side. And as I was reading through, I actually did it. I didn't think I could do it, but I did it. And as I was reading through it, there's probably 50-something references to shoes and footwear. And so I thought as we approach Holy Week, Passover, Easter, the spring, why not bring in an expert, someone who has his doctorate, and to walk us through. Now the pressure's back.
All right.
To walk us through kind of shoe references, because it is fascinating. We have this ancient literature written over thousands of years amongst a bunch of different authors, but there's a constant kind of thread, if you will, of footwear. And since we're shoe folks, why not kind of explore it? So that was my plan. And we've done these episodes before. One time we did, songs about shoes.
Movies.
We did movies about shoes. So let's do biblical references about shoes. And so, Eric, welcome to the Shoe-In Show.
Yeah,
We're glad
welcome.
you're here.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I will say, when you asked me to do this, I thought to myself, I know quite a lot about the Bible, but I've never thought about shoes and the Bible.
Yeah. It's a stretch. That's what you're saying. It's a stretch.
Well, no. Once I started to look into it, I thought to myself, shoes are everywhere.
Yeah.
In fact, in some really important spots. So
Yeah.
I think we'll actually have a lot to say.
Good.
Very cool.
Good. So let's kick it off, because I want it, out of the gate, there's some references that I think, if you're familiar with any of the biblical story at all, there are references to taking off your sandals because you're on holy ground. We meet that up front as God is engaging with Moses. And then Joshua, in the book of Joshua, there's the same reference from the angel of the Lord. So what's your take on kind of this this notion that, hey, at this moment in time, shoes aren't called for. They're actually, you should not wear shoes. So kind of walk us through what you think when you read those verses and why those reference, and it's not the only, there's a lot of different references of footwear, but that's the one that kind of hits you out of the gate.
It does, yeah. So I maybe backing up just a bit, shoes, ancient world at large. When again you asked me to come on here, I thought to myself, do people wear shoes? How often do they wear shoes? Is this a common thing? Was this for the people who had money? And it turns out, as we looked into it, everybody's got shoes. In fact, if you don't have shoes, it probably means you're struggling in life. And so everybody's out there. Everybody's got something on their foot. It's all leather. It's basically it looks a lot like some of the shoes we might even wear today. I found a pair of shoes online that were 5,500 years old, wow. Right? And they look remarkably similar to a fashion that you might find today. Mm-hmm. And so everybody's out there with their shoes on, but they don't have the soles and the padding and the whatnot that we've got today.
The air,
right?
Upper,
yeah.
The comfort foam.
Yeah, the comfort
foam. I feel bad for them.
No memory foam.
So bad. No memory
for the ancient Israelites.
Yeah. So to have shoes on is not unusual. In fact, it's actually quite the norm. So there Moses is. He's up on this mountain. He's probably herding some sheep or doing whatnot. All of a sudden, this burning bush, it's on fire. It's out in the distance, and he starts to walk up to it, and he hears this voice, and the voice says, "Don't come any closer. You're standing on holy ground. Take your shoes off." And so the question is, what's happening in this moment?
Right.
I think a couple things are happening. One, you have to understand that in this Israelite culture, clean, unclean means
ritually,
everything, right? And so shoes become this symbol of that which is unclean. Like quite literally, when you walk into someone's home, you take your shoes off, you wash your feet because you don't want to get their house dirty.
Right.
Not dissimilar to what you might do today.
Yeah,
right?
like in a lot, particularly in Asian cultures, when you go in, in Japan, and also taking off your shoes is a requirement before you enter the home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's always, when I walk into someone's home today, there's that awkward moment where... You don't know. Yeah, you don't know. Is this a family?
I usually ignore it. I'm like, I'm a grown man. I'm wearing my shoes.
I'm wearing my shoes, yeah. Yeah, so back then they take their shoes off, and of course not just in homes, but in holy places in general, temples and whatnot. So Moses is there. God's shouting to him, "Hey, take your shoes off. This is a clean place." Right. That in of itself is interesting as well, because there he is. He's on a mountain. There's dirt everywhere. There's grass everywhere, and so apparently God's dirt is clean.
Right. Just not man's shoe.
Just not man's shoe.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it takes you also, there's this passage soon thereafter during the Passover where God's like, eat with your shoes on because you're going to have to get going. And it's this notion that something's imminent. You shouldn't be relaxing. You should be ready to go because I'm going to shepherd you out of Egypt. Talk to us about kind of that. That's separate, obviously, than you're on holy ground. This is more like be prepared, be ready to rock and roll because you're not going to have time to put your shoes on unless you have them on right now. Yeah,
so same story, just fast forward the time a little bit. Moses now has gone back to Egypt. He's got all his people ready to leave Egypt. They're enslaved. And he says to them, "All right, let's have this last meal together, but everybody keep your shoes on. Everybody get your staff ready because at any moment we're out of here." And so this is probably unusual for them to be eating and wearing this unclean garment, but that's what they're doing. because they know they're ready to head out on a journey.
So that was the first instance of fast food
That's right.
in the history.
That's
And we
right.
just discovered that on Shoe and Show.
Yes,
That's right.
So-
This is scholarly work, Andy.
At its best.
Let's peel back those onions and see what happens. Everybody just listening today just got blown away. You
They
just got
did.
dropped a lot of knowledge.
They
think
did.
about that as you go to McDonald's.
Yep,
And
yep.
think at the same time.
Yeah, when when the Passover, the person preparing the Passover meal or the meal that essentially became Passover says, "Is this takeaway or dine in?" You just had to say takeaway, right?
That's right.
Because you had to go, man.
Get
You
your shoes on.
Got your shoes on. Well, that's interesting because you have you're on holy ground. You have prepare yourself, and then you have this whole other realm. There's a couple other realms we'll get to. Another one's just absolute disrespect, right? Or some kind of showing some kind of dominance over something. So, for example, and we saw this in modern day times when President Bush was in Iraq and the reporter threw a shoe at the president. He dodged it, and it's the funniest animated GIF you'll ever watch over and over again. But there's several lamenting psalms where there's this talk about, in particular, footwear is, Moab is my wash basin. Upon Edom I cast my shoe over. So there's this kind of imagery of throwing your shoe over something or showing that you have dominance over something, or you have. So it's a cultural reference. It's thousands of years old, and it was. And even to this day, and that particularly in the Near East, the culture is still kind of shows that same kind of thread is still surviving today.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about if the shoe is an unclean thing, what else are you going to throw at somebody but the most unclean thing you've got on you? And shoes happen to fly through the air quite well. So
Yeah.
Especially a heel.
especially a heel. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
Have you ever had your kids? And I struggle with this. As a guy, I'll come downstairs. I'll have my shoes. I almost put them on like the kitchen counter. And my wife's like, "What are you doing? You walk in bathrooms in those things." I'm like, I gotta But one time we were somewhere and I put a brand new pair of shoes on the table, and a woman that we work with, Kathy, it was this cultural thing for her. You don't ever put shoes on tables.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they're unclean.
My wife's the same.
Yeah.
Even new shoes is some kind of bad
Right.
luck or something like that.
Yeah.
And when I was doing some work with the Saudi ambassador in Washington D.C., I went to a friend of mine who had lived there, and I was trying to pick up cultural tips of being respectful. And one of the first tips was you should not show the bottom of your shoe, the sole of your shoe. So don't sit cross-legged during the meeting. Sit with your shoes on the ground because they
Interesting.
consider it offensive to show the bottom of your shoe to someone.
Hard,
in that
man.
culture.
I love sitting cross-legged. That'd be really hard.
I'm sure I did. I'm sure I offended everyone in the building.
Kicked your feet up on the desk.
Hey, y'all, I'm from North Carolina. Where are you from?
That cracks me up. Oh man! All right, so you got those are kind of some of the three areas, particularly in the Old Testament. But there's this interesting passage, Eric, that we talked about in Ruth. And why don't you kind of explain the scenario with Ruth and the transaction, this kind of transaction that goes on with footwear?
Yeah, so this is almost a wholly other category. So the book of Ruth, to get to the end, if you're not familiar with the story, Ruth's husband dies at the very beginning, and so she is without children. She's without a husband. She's without essentially a way to make her way in the world in that patriarchal culture, and so she's looking. She's on the hunt for a husband, and she finds a guy. His name is Boaz, and they get to the end of the book, and Boaz is ready to marry her, but it's actually not his place to do this. She's supposed to marry somebody else.
Why is that?
Again, it's a cultural thing. It's supposed to be the husband's brother or nearest relative who marries her, but he chooses not to, and instead Boaz jumps in and becomes what is technically called a kinsman redeemer. At this point, there's again, this is unfortunate, but again, the nature of the patriarchal culture in which they lived, there's a transaction that happens, and in the transaction, he essentially gives one of his shoes to the guy who is supposed to marry Ruth.
Right.
In doing so, there is a contract that they enter into. And so there are two sides of this contract, and they're both saying they agree, and Ruth can marry the one instead of marrying the other. And I think what's happening here is there's this symbolic thing that happens where there's two shoes, right? Everybody has two shoes.
Yeah.
And both shoes or both feet or both parties in this case have said, yeah, we're in, we agree. And now I have this shoe that represents the contract that I've entered into, and Ruth is now married to Boaz instead of this other guy.
Yeah, it's some bizarre cultural things that we're not familiar with.
Yeah, right.
And you have to wrestle with these things, and I think the Bible does that a lot. But at the end of the day, the book is called Ruth.
Yeah,
and
true.
she is the heroine, or she's the hero of the story, and through her, King David is born. So there's that tie back to him. But it's interesting that in that that cultural transaction, that you do pass kind of a shoe across, and I mean, I don't know why a shoe was chosen.
Yeah, why the shoe? I don't know that either.
Particularly if it's unclean. Was it a brand new pair of kicks, or was it one that Boaz had been roaming the countryside for years in? It was like, oh, I'll just go dig out my worst pair out of the back of the closet and bring it to him.
Maybe it was the lowest common denominator of basically a transactional purpose, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't. Maybe Boaz didn't feel the need to give some animal or something big.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it was the assumption that this is already taking place and there has to be some transaction, so it must be the most minimal thing. I mean, even if it's one shoe and it's the lowliest thing, it just is something that has that transaction that allows that to take place. I mean, and I don't know the culture, but my assumption is you can't just sign a document. You have to have some exchange.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's what the thing was. It's like, this is already going to happen. I don't really owe you anything, but I'm going to give you something.
Right.
And I'm going to give you the lowliest thing I can give you because her worth is more than what we're doing.
Right.
But
and it's a set, right? Yeah. So you're splitting up a set for which you both will have a piece of that set.
Yeah,
maybe he was saying, take a walk in my shoes, brother.
And maybe it was.
My name's Boaz. I just threw my shoe down the gauntlet.
I have this coolest name in town. Take my shoe. Any other Old Testament Tanakh Hebrew Bible references that we didn't cover, Eric, before we pivot over to the New Testament? I'm looking at my list.
Yeah,
I was shocked about how many.
I was shocked as well. There's a verse that shows up in Amos. Amos is railing against the Israelites at this point. They're not doing what they should be doing. And he says to them, for example, their society as a whole is not taking care of the neediest and the poorest. And he says that they are willing to sell the neediest for merely a pair of shoes, suggesting again that the shoe is everybody's got shoes, and here instead of taking care of this person that you should be taking care of, probably a person who doesn't have shoes, you have chosen to instead just take care of yourself and buy a new pair of kicks. Right.
Man, that is like powerful preaching that I need to take to heart. Many a times I buy too many pairs of kicks. In Isaiah, I did want to hit on this major prophet. Shout out to Isaiah because at the time, this is Isaiah 20, chapter 20, verses 2 through 3. At that time, the Lord spoke by Isaiah, the son of Amoz, saying, "Go and loose the sackcloth from your waist and take off your sandals from your feet." And he did so, and he walked naked and barefoot. Then the Lord said, "As my servant Isaiah has walked naked and barefoot for 3 years, as a sign and as a portent against Egypt and Cush." What's going on in that passage? Why did Isaiah hang out without any kicks or any clothes for 3 years?
Oh man! Wow. Where to start? I think part of this has to do with whenever you get a prophet. Jesus does the same thing actually, where there is this connection with the lowliest. It goes back to what I was saying before, but this idea that you need to understand those who don't have clothing, those who don't have shoes, those who don't have anything in this life, if you're going to then understand what it is you need to do as a culture to fix the problems that we
Right.
have.
So it's a sign, this sackcloth thing, in no sense, like the sign of lamenting. Obviously, Isaiah came to tell them what's what, and they weren't really listening, the nation of Israel. And so I think that's also part of it, to draw attention to
I think so, yeah.
the heart of God is in relation to what the Israelites were doing at the time in disobeying him. So, which is the entire human story, right? It's not just in this word; it's also how kind of the entire human story plays out. So that was an interesting thing to not have shoes for 3 years. It's in fact. Souls for Souls, the charity that we partner with a lot, they do they don't do it for 3 years, but they have a barefoot day, so you can kind of connect with people who don't have shoes and understand how hard it is to go out throughout your daily life without any shoes. So you'll see folks, without shoes at work, or going to places. Although, no shirt, no shoes, no service. Something we often talk about, but
That's why you get Uber Eats on that day.
that's right. So that's also, it's kind of the same concept, understanding people who don't have footwear and what it's like not to have footwear. So
Yeah.
all right, with that, let's pivot over to the New Testament, the Christian Bible, as we think through kind of some of the scriptural references within that. One of the ones that comes together in all the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is this notion that John the Baptist is here to foretell of the Messiah's arrival. And he obviously had his own following, John the Baptist in particular. But what does he say in response to whether or not he is the Messiah relative to who Jesus is within that context?
Yeah, so John the Baptist is out by the Jordan River. He's beginning to gather quite a following. He has to be a magnetic sort of person. He's got people coming out to see him far and wide. I mean, to get to the Jordan River, this is a little bit of a journey for these people, and so he's beginning to gather disciples. Even he's got folks around him. And they begin wondering, hey, are you the one that we're all looking for? Are you the Messiah?
Yeah.
Are you the guy? And he says no. In fact, somebody's coming after me, and I'm not even fit to tie this guy's shoes, right?
Right.
Which I think gets us back to where we started, this idea of an unclean thing, right? This shoe is that which is not clean. It's the dustiest part of your body. If you're walking around in the ancient world, no roads, you're on just there's no paved roads anyway,
right.
But you've just got dirt. And so John here is saying, I'm not even fit to tie this guy's shoes. I'm not even fit to touch the dirtiest spot on his body here. And so he's saying, no, definitely not the guy, right? I'm definitely not the guy, but there is somebody coming, and he's coming soon.
Right, right. So again, it's a reference to this notion that, I'm unworthy to even tie this guy's shoes. But what's interesting to me is that there is this scene at the end of Jesus' life where he's going around washing people's feet.
Yeah, yeah.
And so this notion that that's the ultimate kind of sign of service in that culture.
Yeah.
Because these cultural references, the Boaz thing, these get lost on us, right?
Sure.
So when I think about someone washing my feet, all right, my feet may be stinky a little bit or whatever, a little sweaty, but they're not that dirty. But when you're trudging through
When you got those Jerusalem cruisers on.
That's
you
right.
don't get the dust.
Exactly. That's right.
Those open-toed.
Yeah. And you got your bunions and your gnarly toenails or whatever else is going on. I can't imagine there are any kind of podiatrists on site or, massage therapists for your feet or whatever. So it seems to me that it's a pretty gnarly thing at that point to have to wash someone's feet.
Yeah, I would think so. This has to be a lowly position. And then once again, it's Jesus as the prophet who's connecting with the lowliest. He's taking the lowliest spot, and he's saying to himself, And he's saying to his disciples, I am doing what you all should be doing. That is, I'm serving you in the same way that you should be serving the rest of the world. Taking the lowliest spots, taking care of the people who have needs.
All right. So as we think through from there, what other references we've talked about? In the book of Acts, Peter's in prison. He gets sprung out of the pen, and the angel says, "Put on your shoes. You got to strap your shoes on and get going." What other references are in the New Testament that you stumbled across that you thought were of interest?
Yeah, there's a few others. That would be one there in Acts. I think it was Acts 12. Again, going back to the Gospels, you have Jesus sending out disciples, and when he does, he says, don't take anything with you. Don't take bags. Don't take money. Don't take nothing. All you can take is a staff and your shoes, right? Staff and shoes, which is walking instruments. If they're going to be doing a lot of walking, and there's the expectation that everything will be provided along the way somehow, some way they will be provided. I think the throwback there is to what's happening as the Israelites are leaving Egypt. They're about to walk through the desert. They too were told, right, just take your staff, just take your shoes, have those on, eat that fast food. We're about to head into the wilderness, and God's going to provide. The same thing's happening in the New Testament.
So this is urgency, right?
I think there's urgency, yeah. But I also think there's an intentional parallel happening between those two events.
You got to go to the Burger King of Kings and get your food, and then off you go.
That's right. Get the Whopper Jr., y'all. 2 for $5 deal.
5 shekels.
Mini tackle Perez, baby.
So, speaking of shekels, you were in Israel recently, and one of the cool things about the industry, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this and kind of nerd out on biblical shoe references, is that there's obviously a lot of Christians in the industry, a lot of Jewish families in the industry, and so there's this connection with Israel that you find where a lot of our friends in the industry, our Jewish friends in particular, they spend time, a lot of time every year in Israel, and they come back here. And I think we're going to do more on and talking to my friend Rick Muscat about ways in which, for millennia, the import-export business has been something that Jewish folks in particular have focused their livelihoods around, because they've traded with the world for many hundreds of years. And so there's kind of a cool theme there. But you were just in Israel, and it was your first trip. How did that all kind of lay into your experience with obviously reading through scripture and your background there? But I also know that you had some interesting kind of shoe tie-ins as well that we talked about. So I was curious to hear more about that and just kind of get your take on your trip there.
Sure, I'll try to keep this tied to shoes as much as possible. Exactly. Here.
Did you bring shoes on the trip? That's the question.
I did. I brought
go
staff.
Barefoot?
Did you bring your shoes and your staff?
But we even stopped at a shoe factory actually, and I'm trying to remember the name of it right now. But it's one that was, I think, is relatively famous.
Yeah.
Do you happen to recall the name of it?
Yeah, I'll pull it up because I'm blanking on it right now.
I said I went there, and then Matt said, "Oh, was it XYZ?" And I said, "That sounds right." I did not buy shoes, but a lot of the folks I was with certainly did. But anyway, so while there, a couple things popped out. One, rocks everywhere, right? So it's incredibly rocky terrain. And so I imagine if you're walking anywhere, you're walking on rocks at some point. And so shoes have to be a necessity. So when we talk about like everybody's wearing shoes, I think part of this is because, if you're not, your foot's bleeding, So there's that. But also, I think one of the things that really struck me was their interest in beauty, just generally speaking. Mm-hmm. So I think my guess is when most people think about like ancient cultures, we think about cavemen, we think about people who are stuck.
Neanderthals.
Yeah, Neanderthal, right. who really care little about some of the things that we care about. When I got there, though, what you see is you're walking through these ancient towns. You're walking through ruins, and the ruins are filled with these beautiful statues, these pillars on top of which stand these beautiful carvings. You're walking through these ancient synagogues that still have like the colors that they painted these on the walls, right? And so they clearly cared about things that looked good and were beautiful. And I mean, I don't have hard evidence for this, but I'm gonna guess this tied into shoes as well. Like my guess is that at least for the elite, the people who had money, the people who were able to, they were buying not just shoes for function, but shoes for fashion, shoes for beauty. I would bet quite a bit of money on that.
Well, it's interesting if you think about culturally in today's world, the U.S. and American brands really dominate the global landscape, right? Nike, I think Nike's the number one brand in China, and so. If you take that parallel to ancient times, you think about Egypt being kind of the cultural behemoth in the region, and in particular the tie-in with the Israelites being enslaved there, but engaging with that culture in various forms and fashions that they took with them many of those things. Yeah. So as they established their own society and built up their own nation, there's probably a lot of callbacks to some of the ancient fashion and other cultural practices that they were accustomed to based on their engagement with the Egyptian people and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're a hub of all, like they're at a crossroads of all sorts of cultures. You've got Egypt to the south and to the west, and then you've got Babylon and Assyria up in the north and to the east, and then you've got eventually Greece and of course the Romans come in, and then at that point you've got culture coming from literally across the world to this one very small place. As my tour guide kept reminding us, is the size of New Jersey. Right. And everybody has to pass through this small piece of property in order to get where they want to get to, and so it becomes really a contentious part of the world. Still is today. But
as the miracle that is Israel. The company that you went to is Nayat Footwear.
That's right. Yeah, that is right.
And according to their website, the Teva Nayat company was founded in 1942, so even before the reestablishment of Israel. In Kibbutz Nayat Mordecai, located in the Upper Galilee of Israel. Today, nearly 70 years later, the company's sold in over 6,000 points of sale around the world. So there's another company, Jerusalem Sandals. Nayat's probably kind of the preeminent Israeli footwear brand for which your tour.
Are these handcrafted? Or are they like typical setup machines, or they got robotics? Or?
I don't know. Did you go into the factory at all?
No, we didn't see the factory, so I don't know.
Quality is a prominent guiding value, Andy, in their organization.
Somebody's good at marketing.
Every step of the manufacturing process is handmade.
There you go.
By professionals with an emphasis on the small details, Andy, which provides a substantial added value to their products and to their clients. They undergo sensitive, I'm almost done, and meticulous quality control processes. So that's where you went, and that's cool.
Yeah. So I'll say, you mentioned it's a kibbutz. I did not know what that was prior to going there, but it's this. What it is, they have, they're all over the place, but they're these small little communities that essentially are, they share all things in common, and they generally have like one trade, here, shoe trade, that makes the money for the community. They all work on it together. They share things. They probably eat together. They probably do lots of life together. But they kind of keep to themselves, and this is how they.
It's like a North Carolina mill town, Andy.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, McAdden Mill or something like that.
Yeah. Back in the day, North Carolina, a mill was, the mill owner owned the church and the school, and everyone went and worked at the mill, and. So, well, that's cool. Any other kind of closing thoughts before we bring Jasmine in for what you got, what you getting?
Let's bring Jasmine in.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so we do this thing where we ask our guests what shoes they have on and you'll be fine, I promise. And then you can redeem yourself with what you want to
What
get.
you would buy.
Yeah. So we'll start off. I have some over-the-knee boots from Public Desire. They're gray, and I plan on getting. Puma has some like woman-only shoes that they just released, so I'm definitely getting those. I'm blanking on the name, but I know that they look awesome, and they're like blue and pink and like lime green colorway. They had like a campaign like to like empower women, so I'm definitely getting those.
What are they low? Or
Yep, they're low tops,
Uh-huh.
athletic. Like they almost look somewhat running shoes, but not really. Yeah, they're
Gotcha.
just style.
Andy?
I have on some Fila's that our
Nice.
friend Joe Passio made specially for me. So talk about handcrafts.
That's
and,
right.
Precision.
Quality assurance.
I can't. He told me I couldn't take pictures because these are coming out in summer or fall 2019. So I'm way ahead of the curve for the first time in my life.
Nice.
Thanks to my friend Joe. I think I am going to get some Kohan Zero Grands. I think I'm going to get some of the leather athletic kind of base shoe. You got it on right now?
Well, I got a
got
0
something
Grand
similar?
on. It's a Grand OS, which is a knit upper athletic rubber outsole.
I don't think it is actually a 0 grand. I think it is $100 to buy those shoes. So it's, not, it's technically not a 0 grand. It is a grand. That's probably, so.
They're good. They're light. I like those.
Yeah, I love
Maybe
these
they
shoes.
mean maybe they mean the ounces or whatnot.
I think
but-
that's what
Yeah,
they mean.
yeah.
So I got the Cole Haans on. I love these shoes. In fact, back in June, I was in a factory tour in China, and I went to the facility, and they were in the sample room. They had these very same shoes on it, so I got to go to the factory. Apparently, I'm gonna have to pick up some naots and a staff because.
Well, here's my staff right here. It's a modern day iPhone. It guides me wherever I want to go.
That's right.
It's almost like a water stick. It will tell me where to go and eat and where to get water and where the local gas station is.
No striking
really
of rocks
impressive.
with this thing.
Hey Google.
So I'm gonna get some naots, I think, and see where that leads. So, Eric,
right.
you're up. Now, Eric's not a shoe guy, so
That's all right. I'm with you.
Yeah, so I had to take my shoe off to even know what I'm wearing. It says Steve Madden.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's
So-
our, Ed Rosenfeld, the CEO, is our chairman now, so
Yeah.
we're good with Steve Madden. That's a good pick. What you gonna get?
What am I going to get?
What's your wife gonna get you?
That's probably the best question. What is my wife going to get me? I don't know. I'm on the hunt for a new soccer cleat, though, if that means anything.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm about to start coaching my son's soccer team again, and I need
Okay.
some new cleats.
Nice.
So I'm a big
Andy's
Adidas-
a big soccer guy.
Adidas soccer
You
fan.
cannot go wrong with Copas.
Yeah.
Adidas
Yeah,
Copa shoe.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think I don't know what they are now, but when I was growing up, they were $80, but they never wear out. They're just solid, like turf cleat, and they're just class. Now you can go with like Nike and go with some other folks. Nike runs a little narrow. That's the only thing. Nike runs narrow. But if you're getting like some of these cleats just wear out really quickly now. I mean, the upper material is a little bit light, but see, I always liked about Copas was there was a lot of sturdiness to it, and there's a lot of stitching on the side.
Yep.
So it actually is functional, and you can wear it for 2 or 3 seasons before you start to like have a wear out issue. So
Yeah.
for me, it's just like functional, and I don't know. What about in the pulpit? What you wearing in the pulpit?
What do I
Yeah,
wear in
good
the
question.
pulpit?
Yeah.
Oh man. I have I don't know if I should say this on the air. I really let my wife buy my shoes for me.
Okay.
You can totally say this is a safe space, Eric.
She
Safe
literally
space.
brings home shoes, and if she didn't, my shoes would just wear out, and
Yeah.
then
You would be barefoot
I would
in
be
the pulpit.
barefoot in the pulpit.
Yeah.
right.
Standing on holy ground.
With an object lesson in hand.
An object
funny.
wasn't ready.
Well, cool, man. I can't thank you enough for coming in and nerding out with me on
Yeah.
scripture and shoe references. And it may not be for everyone who listens to this, but that's too bad. It's our show, and sometimes we just do these things we want to do.
Are we launching this on Good Monday, maybe?
I think we are going to do this Holy Week. So we wish everyone an amazing Passover season, Easter season. It is before we close out, it's like one of the Super Bowls of our industry, because back to school and Easter Passover are like the two biggest selling weeks of the year.
Hallelujah.
So, hallelujah indeed.
Hallelujah.
Exactly. So, Eric, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure to be here.
Thank you
for inviting me.
Thank you.
Folks, this is Shoe and Show. We cover the ins and outs of all things footwear, every kind of product, every kind of type. We focus specifically on the business side of shoes. We try to dig in and see all the different trends and how leaders are making the decisions that they make to propel their brands and companies forward. You can find us at Shoe and Show. We're on Twitter, Facebook, we're online. If you have ideas for show topics that you would like to hear, if you would like to be a guest or know someone who we should be grilling on our podcast, we'll ask the tough questions. You know we will. Just drop us a line. Again, it's shoeandshow.com. And for all of us today, I want to thank you for listening. And until next time, Shoe-In is out.
Shoe-In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.